Esther chapter number 1. As we really begin our journey through the book of Esther, we're going to begin with a message entitled A Royal Rejection. Well, hello, sir. You're welcome. Yeah, you might as well come in and join us. Indeed. So we're beginning through Esther, and we're going to have a look through it. And I want to start off really by just noting this, and this is what we get from Esther chapter number 1, that life is not just a series of random, freak accidents. Life is not totally unplanned. There is a God behind all, a sovereign God that has his hand behind all. What I mean by this, life has meaning. God knows what's going on. God is in control of everything. He is sovereign. The sovereignty of God is one of the greatest blessings for the believer, and yet one of the greatest burdens for the unbeliever. But like we talked about this morning, that God is good. And how that for a believer that's beautiful. And how for an unbeliever, the fact that God is good means that they're in terrible trouble with a holy God. But God is always working out his purposes, and certainly amongst his people, God is always working. He's always moving. We just at times do not see what God is doing. And at times, if we're honest with ourselves, even when we look at it, we say, how could God be doing anything good here? In the situation that's going on in my life, whatever it may be, you look at it and think, where's God in this? How is God moving in this? What are his purposes in this? And sometimes, here's the honest truth, it won't be till we get to eternity that we'll truly understand why God was allowing what he allowed or doing what he did. We may not get the answer in this life, but sometimes in this life we do. It just takes a little bit where we look back and we can see, oh my goodness, I can't believe how amazing God was there. I didn't even see him, but he was moving all these pieces around, and he was sovereignly acting in the background, and he brought good out of a bad thing. God is an expert. I want you to hear this. God is an expert of bringing good out of bad. Amen. An expert at it. If Calvary's cross doesn't tell you that, I don't know what will. You can look at the stories of all the saints of the past. You can look into some of the great missionaries and the difficulties they had. You can look into some of the hymn writers and the difficulties they had. I don't know if you know too much about Joseph Scriven. Joseph Scriven was a missionary from Ireland, but he was a hymn writer. And he had tragedy in his life. As many have. He had tragedy in his life. Just before his wedding, his fiancée was killed in an accident. A year later, as he writes to his mother was sick, and he was across the Atlantic from her, and he writes to her, what a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Have we trials and temptations? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. And Joseph going through a terrible time. But he looks to the character of God, and he takes solace in God. He runs to God as his shelter and pens those words. And how many people have been blessed by those words, encouraged by those words, hailed by those words as they go through the valley experience. And it happens. It is well. Probably is the greatest hymn of them all, I think, probably. There's loads of great hymns. It is well, written out of tragedy. And how many people have been blessed in their walk when they've been on their knees or they've been struggling, and they have heard the words of that great hymn and took them into their heart. It is well with my soul. God's an expert of bringing good out of bad. He's always working. And as we start off in Esther, and we're going to see that, there's some bad situations that are arising, and it's going to get worse as we get into Esther. But God is using these things, and he's going to bring good out of these things. No matter what it is, God can work in it and is willing to work in it. Sometimes we just don't see it. But God's always moving. And he's always working. So what I wanted to do is just go through chapter 1 and really run through the narrative. We're not going to get into too much of kind of application. We just really want to have a look at what's going on, as we will have plenty of time as we go through Esther, as we're going to start to pick it apart. But I wanted to go through it and have a look through it and just really detail the narrative and set the scene and really think about this point that even in this, in the mess that's going on in chapter number 1, in the debauchery that's going on in chapter 1, God is still able to bring good out of bad. Now, as we go through this, many preachers get accused of being 3 points in a poem, right? That's what preachers do. And to be honest, again, God's a Trinitarian. I've said this before. 3 is a special number in the economy of God. That's why I do 3 points as a sermon, usually. It just works that way. It fits. Tonight, you've got 6 points. 6 points. How about that? You ready? What time's dinner? Doesn't matter. You're here for 6 points. And we'll go through it. Right. Point number 1. Let's have a look. We want to look at the details, really. So here we go. We're introduced. Let's read verse 1, chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even into Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. And that in those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces being before him, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. So here we're introduced to this great banquet, and for Eastern rulers, this was a common practice of the day. This wasn't anything unusual, maybe in its size and its extravagance, possibly, but in terms of the principle, they often did this, Eastern rulers, because it gave them opportunity, usually to show off their power, their rule, their riches, and to play up as the deified ruler of Mede and the Medes and the Persians. And this is what Ahasuerus is doing. Now, Ahasuerus or however you want to pronounce that, I don't really care how you pronounce it. He's dead, so he's not going to take offense. But that's his title. That's his title. It means high father or venerable king, similar to Pharaoh or Caesar. I believe that this man is Xerxes the Great of Persia. So this is, if you've seen the film 300, that great standoff there between Greece and Persia. This is this king, Xerxes, that's in there. He's a historical character. And he's organized these banquets because he's about to embark on that campaign. He's about to embark and attack Greece, because at this point, Mede and Persia was the power, and Greece had its uprising, if you like. It was growing, and of course, to expand the empire, Xerxes has his eyes on Greece. He doesn't want them getting ahead of themselves. This empire, actually, of Xerxes is really the last big world empire to come from the east. After this, things start to change, and of course we have the Roman rule come in. But so what he's doing here, as we've read in verses 1 to 4, he's put on a banquet for the provincial officials. 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, massive. He puts on a banquet that lasts 6 months. And it's so that all these different provinces, all these different rulers that are under his umbrella, if you like, can come to the banquet, be impressed by the king. But what he's really doing, he's trying to raise support for his invasion. He wants the people behind them. So he's organized this banquet for these people of the provinces to come, where he is able to show off in front of them. These are 6 months of festivities as he tries and goes on the offensive campaign. It's similar to our ridiculous politicians that whenever they're trying to court your vote for any election, they'll go on their campaigns for months and promise you all sorts of things and try and get you to sign up for them. This is what he's doing. He's raising support for this invasion that he's planning to go on. So he raises this banquet for his provincial officials. Then, verse 5 to 9, after that's finished, there's another banquet that's put on for 7 days. This is for the palace officials. So he deals with all the high men, all the nobles, all the people of influence across his empire. They come out for a period of 6 months where he wines and dines them, basically, to try and impress them so that they will put money in and put support in and be with him as he goes to invade Greece. In verse 5, pick up there, when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace. So this is for the palace officials. This is for those closest. Both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the king's palace. So 7 days for these festivities, where there were white, green, and blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen and purple, the silver rings, pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red, blue, and white, and black, and marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law, none did compel, for so the king had appointed to all the officers of the house, they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to the king. So 7 days, this is just absolute opulence, Gorge yourself, feast yourself, the best of everything. The king's really going for it here. So 7 days. So this is the details that we have. Next, move that on. The drunkenness. Look at verse 10. Look at verse 10. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Sethar, and Carcas, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of the king, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with the royal crown. So I want you to notice there, on the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry. Now we've already read there in verse 8 that drinking wasn't obligatory. It wasn't compelled. Not like today when you go to some events, that if you say, I'm not drinking, don't drink really, they'll be like, why not? Why not? Why not? What's wrong with you? You broken? Drink, drink, drink. This wasn't compelled. This wasn't forced. This was choice. And of course the context of the drink, the alcohol level of the drink's different, but it's 7 days. So even if the alcohol's weaker, 7 days of it, you're going to start to feel it. This is why they partied for so long, right? Because the alcohol's weaker. But still, it says the king's heart was merry. On the last day of the feast, the king's heart was merry. So here he is in a place where he's under the influence. And he's not going to make the best of decisions, because honestly, our best decisions are never made when we're drunk. Never. 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 This king was drunk. And his drunkenness opens him up to the nonsense that's going to follow. Now, I'm not here to preach about alcohol. All I can say is for sure is that the Bible speaks very strongly against drunkenness. Very strongly. Why? Because it wrecks things. It wrecks things. I spoke about RU this morning. A lot of you were there for RU. You remember the people that came. You remember the grip the alcohol had in them. Dangerous stuff. Seen people that are ravaged by it, broken by it, trapped by it, homeless from it, penniless from it. There's a Japanese proverb that says, first the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes the man. It happens. It happens. So this king is drunk and he's going to do something daft, which leads us to the demand, verse 11. Read a little bit of that. The demand is simply this: to bring Vashti, the queen, before the king with the royal crown, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. Now, the queen, as we've read in verse number 9, she's having a separate feast for the women. She's not part of all this. So she's away somewhere else in the palace in Shushan, verse 9. She's entertaining the women. And then there's this call that's made in verse 11 from the king to bring Vashti, the queen, before the people. Now, what does he want to do? Does he want to... Oh, there's a fight going on in there, isn't there? Have they been drinking? So there's... There we go, sorted out. Vashti is to come before all the men, not for anything good. Not for anything good. Not to simply just have a chat with her, but she's there to be paraded, to be brought before all the men like a piece of meat. That's what's happening. That's what's going on. The king wanted to display her beauty before the men as a prized possession, as a piece of meat. He's not treating her as an equal. He's not treating her as anything other than something to be shown off. Now remember, the king's in a drunken state, and in his drunken state, he's called for her. My wife's beautiful. Now, how he was wanting her to be displayed, the level of sexual immorality, we don't know. But we can guess. We can guess. Now, how does Vashti respond to the demand? Let's see if I can get this to work. Verse 12. Let's read. There's defiance. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore the king was very wroth, and his anger burned within him. So Vashti, fair play to her, she's not having it. She's not having it. Now, this is not like today. King's word was authoritative. You defied the king. Oh, but she did. She did. I'm not doing it. I'm not going. I'm not going to do it. Now, the king doesn't respond very well to this in verse 12. In fact, he's enraged, he's wroth, and his anger burned in him. Do you remember our message from this morning? Angry people do stupid things. This is what's going to happen. His anger burned within him. He's in the right. He's the king. How dare she ignore him? The king's anger burned within him. It's consuming him. The Italian poet Alentino wrote this: angry men are blind and foolish, for reason at such a time takes flight, and in her absence wrath plunders all the riches of the intellect, while the judgment remains the prisoner of its own pride. In other words, like we said this morning, angry decisions are usually terrible ones. And that's what happens here. That's what happens with the king. His anger burns within him. It consumes him. He's like, this can't be happening. There's no way this is going to happen. How dare she? When you're in that place where the anger's upon you and you start to think, how dare she? You justify your own actions. King thinks he's in the right. Pride starts to surface. I'm the king. She's my wife. She can't do that to me. He's not thinking. He's not seeing the other person. There's no empathy or apathy there at all. He just wants his wife to come in and to be shown off in front of all the revelers at the banquet. So here he is. He's burning with anger, which leads to the dilemma in verse 15. Look at verse 15. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law? Because she hath not performed the commandment of King Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. So here it is. Let's go back up to verse 13. Look at that. Then the king said to the wise men which knew the times, for so was the king's manner towards all that knew law and judgment. So the king is asked the question. The question in verse 15 is, what shall we do? What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law? Because she has not performed the commandment of the king. Simply this, the king has spoken. Vashti has not responded in the right way. He goes and he consults, verse 13, the wise men which knew the times. What does this mean? I think this points to this kind of Eastern mindset of searching the stars and the signs to get direction. We see this in the book of Daniel, do we not? How we see that Nebuchadnezzar and further on, we see this concept in the East where they do look to the stars, they do look to all these things to give them signs and what they should do, what should be done next. The king pulls in these mystic advisors and he says, what shall we do? What are we going to do with this queen that has defiled us? Surely there must be some signs that you've seen of the way forward in this, O wise men. And as we look at that, we look back all those years ago and we think, well, what are they up to really, looking at the sky for signs? Nothing different to what people do now. I'm absolutely amazed. I heard this on the radio the other day, and it made me chuckle. It made me absolutely chuckle. It really did. But anyway, basically the union for I'm laughing. I'm sorry. It made me laugh. The union for tarot card readers and what do you call them, mediums and all that are. And star sign readers, the union for them, partly the union, are all up in arms because AI, so you're aware AI is kind of taking over where the computer will just fool you, you think that you're talking to somebody and you're not. You're talking to a robot that's spewing out information. They're getting upset because the AI is going to do them out of a job. So now, when you go and get your star signs read at the seaside or whatever, it'll be a computer telling you. It may as well be a computer telling you because it's nonsense. It's nonsense. People get caught up in these things. With mediums and stuff, I'll tell you this now. Absolutely believe this. This is a hill I'll die on. If you go to a medium, there's two possibilities there. Number one, they're a charlatan. 90% of them are, maybe more. The other possibility is simply you're dealing with somebody that's possessed and is under the influence of the devil, and you don't want anywhere near that. None of it. None of it. But this king, he brings them in and he wants some advice. I have no doubt that a man of the power of this king, is really paying lip service. He's pretending. I think he knows what he wants to do. He just wants somebody else to tell him so he feels better in doing it. Isn't that what we're like as people? When we know what we want to do, but we don't want to be seen to be doing what we want to do, so we get people in. And if we get enough people in that say, yeah, that's a good idea, you go, oh, yes, see, I'm going to do that. That is a good idea. That's how our officers' meetings run anyway on the church. But that's the way it is. We want people to agree with their ideas, and this is what he does. So he calls this cabinet meeting. He has these 7 counselors that come along, and they convince him to act. Look at verse 16. And Milton answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. So here the advisor comes along and does what advisors of this ilk, these political pariahs, these people that live and just will go wherever the power is. You see it in politics all the time. And whenever there's anything that goes on, you have these people that come in and they will take a molehill and they will turn it into a mountain. And that's what's going on here. This guy comes along and says she's not only done wrong to the king, but to all the princes, but to all the people that are in the provinces. So basically, she's wronged everybody. Not just you, king. It's bigger than you, king. This is everybody. Absolutely everybody. Why? Look at verse 17. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. When it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought into him before him, but she came not. Not only have you been wrong, king, but this wrong is going to spread through your kingdom. And if you don't do anything about this, tomorrow there's going to be an uprising. And your kingdom's going to be in ruins. Verse 18, likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all of the king's princes, which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there rise too much contempt and wrath. So here there's clear fear-mongering going on from these political advisors. Fear-mongering to say, if you don't deal with this, king, if you don't do something now, your kingdom's going to crumble. It's going to be in disarray, and it's going to be your fault because you haven't acted on Vashti's disobedience towards you. You want to do something about it. Verse 19, if it please the king, let there go a royal commandment. Now, these guys, honestly, they make me sick. Listen to their language. If it please the king. These are, in every kind of, fairy tale story of castles and all this sort of stuff, there's always the king's advisor. They're little wormy type people. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him. Let it be written among the law of the Persians and the Medes. For those that don't know, the law of the Persians and the Medes was that once it was given, it couldn't be rescinded. Once the king spoke, once it was in the law, that was it. No going back, no turning back. It was settled, it was done. It was to be viewed as eternal. So let it be written among the laws of the Medes and the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all this empire, for it's great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honour, both to great and small. So here's what they propose. They say that there's to be a law put out that Vashti no longer is queen, that she can't come before the king anymore. She's rebelled, then that's it. She's out, she's done. But more than that, this letter is to go out, and it's to go out to all those households to reinforce the fact that the man is to rule that home and the woman is to be subservient to him. So again, this is escalated from one single event because of these people that have come in and puffed the smoke in, and the king's pride is being fueled, and he's been told that if he doesn't do something, the kingdom's going to crumble. Worse than that, people are going to look at him and mock him and say he was the king that couldn't control his own wife. So his pride is hurt, his feelings are hurt, all the kind of emotions that he's going through, he's angry, and off the back of that, he then makes the decision. Verse 21, and the saying pleased the king and the princes and the kingdom according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters unto all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. Here the king acts. He listens to the advice of those that have made this something more than it should have been. And he acts, and he puts this law in, sent out to all. Francis Bacon wrote in his essays, a man that studies revenge keeps his own wounds green, which otherwise would heal and do well. If the king had just sobered up a little, if he'd have took some time, stepped away from it, looked at the bigger picture, he probably would have never opposed his wife. After all, really and truly, she was showing more character than he did. She was being more honourable than he was, and he was king. She was in the right, and he was in the wrong. He was parading her. But he didn't. He was motivated by anger, revenge, wanted to heal his pride. So the king agrees to the advice, and then Vashti is deposed. His couriers send out the letters across the province that the king has acted. Vashti has been removed from her position, and more than that, every home was being reinforced with the truth that women are to stay silent and the man is to have the rule and the reign. The king has issued an edict that's come out of faulty thinking. Why? Because he's emotional. He's drunk. Probably tired. 7 days. His pride's hurt. And he makes a silly decree, and off it goes. And when it's done, it can't be undone. We're going to see this behavior again later in Esther from this king. But it's the law of the Medes and the Persians. Nothing can be changed. Nothing can be taken away from it. It is what it is, and off it goes. So the decree sent forth. Now, Vashti is not immediately replaced at this point. She's taken from her position. She's not replaced. Because what happens is between the end of verse 22 and then verse number 1 of chapter 2, the king goes off to fight his war. He goes off to fight against Greece, and he's thoroughly defeated. You know, you can go and look in the history books for this. He's thoroughly defeated, and when he comes back, no doubt licking his wounds, feeling sorry for himself, he wants to pleasure himself by bringing a new queen in, basically. And that's when the search for the queen takes place. But we'll deal with that next Sunday, Lord willing. But what we want to talk about as we finish up this, and really I want you to see, is that in these events that have happened, there's nothing good. Nothing good at all. The king's behavior is outrageous. He's treated his wife deplorably. Vashti stood, and rightly stood, and said, I'm not going to dance in front of all these strangers and all these men. I'm not going to be paraded like a piece of meat. I'm not doing it. And she paid. She paid for her stand. Her position was taken away from her. But these are the things, bad all they may be, that are going to lead to us, as we look at chapter number 2, where we're going to see that Esther comes in to be the queen, to take Vashti's place. And ultimately, later in the book, Esther is the one that stands before the king and stops the entirety of the Hebrew people being exterminated. So what's going on in chapter number 1 is, even though God is not mentioned once, God is moving in this. How? I don't know. He didn't cause it, yet he allowed it. This is the amazing thing that I've talked to you before about God's sovereign will, but yet man's choices, that God is always sovereign. And like the cross, we talk about Pilate and we talk about those. Could they at any point have chose a different path? Yes. Would have Calvary always happened as it did? Yes. How do we work that out? We don't. That's God. He's sovereign. And all I know is that in Esther chapter number 1, in the midst of that debauchery, in the midst of those banquets, in the midst of that king's bad behavior, he has used that to bring Esther to a point in chapter number 2 where she's the queen for such a time as this. What I know that God is an expert of bringing good out of bad. I think of our mine and Claire's testimony, and I'm sure most of you have heard it, but really the kind of point that really had the impact that spoke to us spoke to Claire really, was Claire's Auntie Diane. And that was the thing that the Lord used to bring Claire to her knees before the Lord. And her coming to God, it then brought her to a place which strengthened her to then lead me to the Lord. And I look back on that and think, God meant that for good. God knew what he was doing. I didn't see it at the time. I'm sure Claire didn't see it at the time. What good could come out of it? Her auntie, closest to her in terms of spiritual advice, the one that didn't judge her, the one that she was able to run to in her days of terrible behaviour. And I've only heard half of it. And honestly, if it was my church and it was Addison, I don't know what I'd do with her. I really don't. Thankfully, my daughter's an angel, so I don't have to worry about that. He says, no. But in all that difficulty and hardship, God was working. You maybe sit here tonight and you can think about your testimony before the Lord, how you came to know him or whatever, or how he showed his face in the most difficult of times. And you look back and think, my goodness me, I couldn't see it at the time, but God was doing something good there. That's our sovereign God. And out of this bad situation will come a new queen. Out of this situation, Esther will be risen up. And it's Esther who is risen up for such a time as that. Now I wonder, as we close tonight, what has God risen us up for now? I don't believe in accidents. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in a sovereign God. Somebody said to me last week, I got a phone call at just this time when I was feeling this way from another believer. That was strange, wasn't it? No, it wasn't strange. That was a sovereign God that cares and loves for you. But what is it? Why are we here? Each and every one of us, as we said, why? It's for something. I know it is. What is it for? It's for the commission. What we're called here to do. That we might show others the truth of God. That we might be Esther's, Mordecai's, whatever it is. That we might answer our call in our time, knowing that God has brought us to this point for such a time. God's providence has brought us all together. Providence has been defined as the hand of God in the glove of history. Now the stage is being set for Esther to enter, for Mordecai to enter, the characters that we looked at last Sunday night, for Haman to enter. And we're going to see God sovereignly work. But we are his characters today. We're the ones that are raised up, I believe, for such a time as this. Hopefully through the book of Esther we're encouraged that God will use all the bad and bring it to good. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the book of Esther. We thank you for the truth of your word, that you are sovereign, that even we see this king and his behaviors and his decisions, God, you're using that through that Esther will be raised up to a position of influence within that kingdom. Lord, she was truly a woman for such a time. But Lord, you're the same God today as you were yesterday. And Lord, your purposes are still to be played out. Lord, what role do we have as a church and as individuals? I believe it's for such a time. Lord, will you help us to see that? And that despite difficulties, trials, troubles, worries, whatever it may be, Lord, that you're an expert of bringing good out of bad. So Lord, will you help us, encourage us, challenge us, strengthen us, Lord, for whatever you have for us, for such a time. Amen. All right, let's sing our last hymn.